Dear children, in the last video, you learned about the economic system, an arrangement where how the central problems of an economy are solved. And you learned about the features or how the central problems are solved by the three economic systems such as socialist, capitalist and mixed economy. And we learned that India adopted a mixed economy after the independence. Now today we are going to learn the topic economic planning and goals of 5-year plan. Now what is a plan? Now after adopting a system, that system has to be implemented, right? So for the proper running of that system, a plan has to be adopted. So the government of India adopted an economic planning for the proper running of our economy. Now before moving on to economic planning, let us simply define what is a plan. What is a plan? When you are going to do something, when you are going to arrange an excursion or something else, a program, anything else, you will plan in before, isn't it? That is for the proper execution of the program. So let us see what is a plan. How can we define a plan? A plan is a document showing detailed scheme, program and strategy worked out in advance for fulfilling an objective. For fulfilling an objective, you should have a detailed scheme, then program and strategy. There should be a detailed scheme, well planned. If you are implementing something, it has to be properly planned. So it should have a detailed scheme, then it should have a program and it should have a strategy. These three measures are very important for a plan. So what is a plan? A document showing detailed scheme, program and strategy worked out in advance for fulfilling an objective. So these three, detailed scheme, program and strategy, they are worked out in advance for the fulfilling of the objective. That has to be worked out in advance for fulfilling the objective. Simple example I told you, if you are planning for an excursion, you have to decide on the place that you have to go. You will take the majority opinion for that. Then you will discuss it with your teacher. Then you will try to frame out the expenses that you are going to face. Then you will plan for the number of days that you have to go. So all these are the one which you plan just before the excursion. Then only the excursion or the trip becomes an enjoyable one, right? So a planning is required for every aspects in our life. So likewise, each and every government also requires a planning for the proper running of the economy of a country. Now, so soon after the independence, when an economic system, mixed economy was adopted by the government, it was a responsibility of the government to make the economy to run properly so that the concept of prosperity can be brought back. Now, for that, under the leadership of under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, India started planning the economy. That is known as economic planning. How to plan the economy of our country. For the proper functioning of an economy, planning has to be done. So both plan and planning. Plan simply means what? It is a detailed statement or strategy for fulfilling a particular objective. Likewise, every country has got an economic planning. So what is economic planning? So you know Jawaharlal Nehru was a prime minister that time. So under his leadership, economic planning was suggested. Now what is economic planning? It can be defined as the major economic decisions. Which are the major economic decisions? What to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, by the conscious decision. What is meant by conscious decision? When you make a decision, you have to be very conscious. That means you should have a proper awareness regarding all those things. You can't take a decision simply. You have to learn about that particular problem. Then only you can take a decision. So only through a conscious decision of a determinate authority. So who is a determinate authority here? Definitely the government or the people who govern the country. On the basis of what? comprehensive survey of an economy as a whole. Government cannot take a decision without a survey. Government has to learn the condition of the economy. How many people are there? Which are the different sections of people? How is their living standard? Everything has to be learned by the government. Otherwise, government cannot take a decision on what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. So, all the conscious decision has to be taken by the determinate authority government only by doing a proper survey of the economy. That is known as an economic planning. So, if the planning is done like that, an economy can function properly. So, I will read the definition of economic planning once again. It can be defined as the major economic decisions by the conscious, that is major economic, it can be defined as a major economic decisions on what to produce, how to produce and for whom to produce by the conscious decision of determinate authority on the basis of comprehensive survey of an economy as a whole. Hope it is clear to you. Now, Government of India on the basis of that objective set up a planning commission in 1950 with Jawaharlal Nehru as the chairman. So, under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru as a chairman in 1950, a planning commission was adopted by India. Planning was fixed for 5 years. For how many years the planning was fixed? 5 years. The planning was fixed for 5 years for what? For the effective use of resources. What to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. For the effective use of the resources, the planning was adopted by India under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru with the chairman in the year 1950. Now, the 5-year plan. This came to be known as 5-year plan. Planning for 5 years. Okay, so first 5-year plan was from 1st April 1951 to 31st March 1956. So, how many years? 5 years. It was a plan for 5 years. How Indian economy can be planned for 5 years. So, first plan was from April 1st 1951 to 31st March 1956. Now, why this 5-year plan was adopted? To ensure the weaker sections of the people are benefiting from the economic progress of the country. So, to ensure what? How the weaker sections of the people are benefiting from the economic progress of the country. When there is a progress in the economy, how the people are benefiting from that. To assess that, the 5-year plan was adopted. Now, we are going on to the next topic. It is very important from the examination point of view. Goals of 5-year plan. Now, what are the goals of a 5-year plan adopted by the Indian government in 1950? First goal is growth. Now, what is meant by growth? Growth means a country's capacity to produce goods and services within the country. What is the total volume of goods and services produced by a country within the domestic territory? That is known as growth. Depending on that, we can measure the growth of the country. So, definitely when I speak that sentence, one particular concept should come to your mind, what you have learned in class 10, that is GDP, gross domestic product. So, what is gross domestic product? So, we can say growth emphasizes on the steady increase in GDP. So, what is meant by growth? A country's capacity to produce goods and services within the country. So, total volume of goods and services produced in the country means the concept is GDP. Therefore, growth as a goal emphasizes on increase in the GDP. Now, we have to define what is GDP. What is GDP? Market value of all final goods and services produced in a country during an year. Market value. not the money value, market value. You will learn the differences between all these in macroeconomics, the first chapter, national income accounting, which we are going to learn. So, market value, the goods and services which are brought in the market value of all the final goods and services. Final goods and services means what? The goods and services which are meant for final use only. So, the market value of all final goods and services which are produced in a country during an year, within the country during an year is known as GDP. So, when there is a steady growth of GDP, we can say that there is an economic growth. So, economic growth mainly emphasizes on the steady growth of GDP. Now, rise in GDP is a sign of economic growth. Now, from which all sectors the GDP can be derived from? GDP can be derived from agricultural sector, industrial sector and service sector. So, from these three sectors the GDP occurs. So, the GDP is derived from all these three sectors. So, how much is the GDP? That depends upon each and performance of each and every country. As far as India is concerned, the GDP from the agricultural sector can be very high. So, depends on each and every country. In some countries, the GDP rate from the service sector may be high. So, in fact, in short, GDP is derived from all the three sectors: agricultural sector, industrial sector and the service sector. All these three sectors are together contributing to GDP. In some cases, in some countries, one sector can contribute more to the GDP, other two sectors will be low. In some countries, two sectors will be contributing equally to GDP, other sector may be low. It depends on the performance of each and every country. But the contribution of each sector means agriculture, industrial and service sector to GDP is known as structural composition of an economy. What is it known as? Structural composition of an economy. So, the contribution of each and every sector to GDP is known as structural composition of economy. Each and every sector will be making the contribution in a different way. But when they are making a contribution, it makes up structural composition of economy. To be noted, it is very, very important from the examination point of view. Now, we will move on to the next goal. So, the first goal is growth, mainly emphasizes on increase in the GDP. Now, next goal is modernization. What do you mean by this modernization? It means variety of institutional and structural changes in the economy. Structural as well as institutional changes should be made in the economy. Otherwise, we will stick on to whatever we were following in the earlier days. Some changes should happen in the economy when the time passes. Institutional changes, technological changes. Best example for technological changes that you have learned in class 8. I don't know whether you remember how the hydroelectricity is produced from water. Example for the technological changes. So, technological and institutional changes has to happen when time passes. That is known as modernization. No country can stick on to the olden methods. So, when it progresses, some kind of technological and institutional changes has to happen. That concept is known as modernization, and modernization is the second goal of 5-year plan. Now, modernization implies two things. Which are they? Shift in the sector composition of production and diversification of activities. Sector composition. What is meant by sectoral composition? I told you different sectors are contributing in a different way to GDP. So, which sector should contribute the most for the country to achieve economic development? That government has to study. Then government has to emphasize or to give importance to those particular sectors. That is known as a shift in the sectoral composition and diversification of activities. Even in the agricultural sector, instead of making the people engaged only in the agricultural farm, they can be given different diversified activities such as animal husbandry, poultry farming, all those things. that can be decided by the government so that agricultural sector can be uplifted. That is one application of modernization. Now next is advancement of technology. Advancement of technology. Farmers need not wait for the monsoon for the proper farming. Irrigation facilities have to be developed, harvesting machines, threshing machines, all these can save their time. That is an example of modernization, adoption of technology. So these two are the main implications of modernization. So examples of institutional and technological changes. Now modernization thus includes adoption of new technology. Just now we learned adoption of new technology for what? To increase production. And very important, the next one, modernization also includes change in the social outlook. What do you mean by a change in the social outlook? Empowerment. It emphasizes on gender empowerment. What is meant by gender empowerment? Because you know that in India, inequalities existed in the case of men and women. Women were not given that much freedom before. She was allowed to do only the housework. So that kind of inequalities should not be there. So in the modernization during the economic planning, what the government emphasized was to give equal rights for men and women. Gender empowerment means equal rights for women also, so that they also come out with their new ideas and play their role in the society for the upliftment of the economy. So the modernization, the second goal of 5-year plan involves two things: adoption of a new technology and change in the social outlook. Now we will move on to the third goal of 5-year plan, that is self-reliance. That means to be independent. What is meant by self-reliance? It means development through domestic resources to avoid external assistance. What is that? Development through. Our country should develop through domestic resources. That means we should be able to produce the goods and services by using our own resources. Why we are depending on the other country? Next one, and to avoid the external assistance. If we are producing the goods and services by our own, is there any need of external assistance or external help? Not at all. So we have to produce the goods and services by ourselves. That is known as self-reliance, to avoid the external assistance and to produce the goods and services by using our own domestic resources. Therefore, self-reliance was initiated by our government for two reasons. Let us see what is that. To reduce foreign dependence and to reduce foreign interference. Very important, to reduce foreign dependence. Now I told you, to development through domestic resources can be related to this. If we are producing the goods and services by our own, what is the need of a foreign dependence? It can reduce the foreign dependence. We need not import any food grains from other countries. You all remember when Britishers ruled our country, they forced us to import certain things from their country. That kind of importing can be avoided. India should become self-reliant in the production of goods and services. So that was the decision made by the government during the economic planning. If we are producing the goods and services by our own, it will reduce foreign interference also. Because too much of export and import, interference will be increased. That is how Britishers were able to exploit us. Therefore, reduce the foreign interference. Too much of foreign interference can lead to exploitation because they will start ruling us just as how the Britishers did. So, to avoid the foreign interference and to avoid foreign dependence, self-reliance has to be initiated. Therefore, that was one among the goals of 5-year plan. Now we will move on to the next important goal of 5-year plan, equity. What is meant by equity? If this goal is not there, the other three cannot happen. It remains to be meaningless. Now what is meant by equity? Equity means what? Equal distribution of what is being produced in the society. Every sections of people should enjoy the benefit. Now let us see what are the implications of equity. Point number 1, it aims that benefits of economic prosperity should reach all the sections of society. All the sections of society should get the benefit of our economic prosperity. No poorer sections should be avoided. No backward communities should be avoided. Everybody should enjoy the prosperity of our country. So that was, equity was one of the most important goals of our 5-year plan, which was initiated by the government under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru. Now the second aim of equity, every Indian should meet their basic needs such as food, shelter and clothing. Every Indian citizen should get the basic needs such as food, shelter and clothing. Nobody should be deprived out of that. Now the last one is to raise the standard of living and promote social justice. So the last point with related to equity is to raise the standard of living. If everybody is able to meet their needs, definitely the standard of living of the people will increase. If the standard of people are increasing in a society, definitely social justice will happen, and that was a dream of the government. So with that, the government framed out the goals of a 5-year plan. So let us recollect all the goals of 5-year plan. The first goal is equity, increase in GDP. Second one is modernization, adoption of new technology and change in the social outlook. Then comes self-reliance, India to be independent, to avoid the foreign interference and to avoid the foreign dependence. And last, equity, produced goods, benefits should be enjoyed by all the sections of the people. Thank you.